The Mueller investigation, Trump's first impeachment, the fallout after January the 6th. For years now, there has been this tendency to say that Trump is in trouble, not only legal trouble, but political trouble, that he's losing support from his closest allies. We've seen it over and over again. On Saturday, articles came out in the New York Times and the Washington Post suggesting Rupert Murdoch and his Fox News empire are done with Trump. Quote, there are signs that the January 6th hearings have helped convince Murdoch that the former president is losing his political expediency, the Post reported. And the Times said the skepticism towards the former president extends to the highest levels of the company, according to two people with knowledge of the thinking of Murdoch, adding that Republicans have expressed to the Murdochs the potential harm Trump could cause to the party's chances in upcoming elections. Both reports observed that primetime hosts like Tucker Carlson are giving airtime instead to another presidential hopeful, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This seems to me another case of the media talking about something that could be true in some ways, but doesn't actually reflect a lot of what's happening on the ground or on the golf course. Have a look. Nothing to see here, just Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson palling it up at Trump's New Jersey golf course. Donald Trump and Fox are clearly on the outs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, darling of the right-wing masses, was there too, all at a Saudi-funded golf tournament with crowds chanting, "Let's go Brandon." So I'd say things are still looking pretty good for Donald Trump standing on the right, and not just because of golf course moments like that one. Yes, there's a lot of talk about the rise of Ron DeSantis and mutterings about Trump losing his grip on the GOP base. But again, look at what's actually happening on the ground. 5 states are holding primaries on Tuesday: Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. In Arizona and Michigan, 2 swing states that Democrats cannot afford to lose come 2024, Trump's election lie narrative still dominates on the right. In Arizona, the leading Republican candidates for governor, Senate, Attorney General, and Secretary of State all have Trump's endorsement, and they all back the big lie. What's more, Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake has called for the arrest of Dr. Fauci, totally normal. Arizona Senate candidate and Peter Thiel protege Blake Masters has pushed the far-right's racist grace replacement theory in speeches, interviews, and on social media. And then there's Michigan, where Trump endorsed candidates for governor and Secretary of State, Tudor Dixon and Christina Caramo, who are both election deniers. And not just that, Michigan's next Trump-endorsed Secretary of State could be someone who makes comments like this.
Discuss how abortion is child sacrifice and how it's really a satanic practice. It's child sacrifice. Because the God you are sacrificing child to is yourself.
You really can't make this stuff up. As I said, like the Arizona candidates, both Caramo and Dixon in Michigan have pushed the big lie, a sort of prerequisite for any Trump endorsement. And it's a dangerous and false narrative that sadly isn't about to go anywhere, because the big lie is what the GOP now stands for. Politico White House bureau chief and MSNBC host Jonathan Lemire explores the party's shift in his new book, The Big Lie: Election Chaos, Political Opportunism, and the State of American Politics After 2020. It tracks the big lie's origins, how it infected the Republican Party from top to bottom, and its effectiveness as a political tool for manipulation. Lemire writes, coming just over a year after the insurrection, the Republican Party had allowed itself to be hijacked by Trump. Party leaders had gone from condemning the Capitol attack and Trump himself to downplaying it, and finally to coming to terms with it. It was now part of the Republican Party's core belief. Now, it may be a core belief for millions of ordinary Republicans across America today, but it's actually not even something Trump himself believes in. It's called the big lie because Trump knows it's not true. Lemire reveals in the book that even though the then president was claiming on camera that the election was stolen, quote, off camera he took a slightly different tone, even wondering aloud to Kellyanne Conway how he could lose to effing Joe Biden, in what she took as a sign that he understood deep down that he had been defeated, even if he was not ready to say so publicly. Now, Trump is still not ready to say so publicly, but the truth is he doesn't need to. He now has an army of election-denying loyalists running for high office at the state and the federal level, ready, eager, keen to carry the torch of the big lie forward into 2024. Joining me now, Jonathan Lemire, author of The Big Lie, Election Chaos, Political Opportunism and the State of American Politics After 2020. He's also White House Bureau Chief at Politico and, of course, host of Way Too Early, weekdays at 5 a.m. on MSNBC. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me on the show. Congratulations on the book. Let me ask you this. When you're looking at the political landscape right now, Tuesday's primaries, the upcoming midterms, the kind of candidates that are winning on the right, how does that fit into the big picture of what Trump has achieved since January 2021, since 2016?
First of all, thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it. This shows, the election slate we have on Tuesday shows how much Donald Trump still absolutely has the Republican Party in his grasp and how the big lie doesn't just live, it thrives. There was a moment right after January 6th where the GOP could have severed themselves from Trump. We heard some of even his staunchest allies, like Senator Lindsey Graham, denounce him from the Senate floor. There was a moment, an opportunity, where they could have turned their back on Trump and Trumpism. They did not. Within a few weeks after Trump left office, Kevin McCarthy made a pilgrimage down to Mar-a-Lago, as the book reveals, even apologized to Trump for his harsh words on January 6th because he knew he needed Trump's backing to try to be House Speaker if the Republicans retained that House of Congress, and it has only increased ever since. We are seeing now a number of big lie friendly candidates running for office up and down the ballot for things like governor, yes, but also state secretaries of state, where they'll have huge influence over certifying election results. The big lie is a litmus test, and most Republicans are choosing to go with it.
So you have reporters talking to Trump fans at rallies who clearly believe this stuff. I mean, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. You look at the polling that shows how many Republicans believe Joe Biden stole the election, he's not the legitimate president. But I wonder, you point out in the book how Trump has this conversation with Kellyanne Conway where he's basically like, yeah, I can't believe I got beat by this guy. I just wonder, we know that Trump's lying about this stuff. How many other prominent Republicans do you speak to, senators, members of Congress, other members of the quote-unquote GOP establishment, who may say in public, oh, election integrity, but in private they know Joe Biden won fair and square?
Oh, most Republicans do. And I think most establishment Republicans, at least those on Capitol Hill and the Senate side, acknowledge that Biden won, even publicly. That most of them, not all, most of them have come to grips with that. But certainly there are plenty of others who, whether they're in the Senate or the House or in state houses across the country, even if deep down they know that Biden won, they're not going to say so because they're afraid of alienating Trump or Trump supporters. You just mentioned it. Polling suggests that well more than half of Republicans still do not believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected president. It is an absolute crisis of democracy, and we are seeing the big lie used as cover by Republican state legislatures across the nation to try to restrict access to the ballot. It's an ongoing, persistent threat.
So we have this big lie from Trump, which threatens our democracy, but of course, you and I and those of us who have covered Donald Trump for many years know that lying is what he does. It's like breathing for him. And what he's been able to do over the past few years, including while he was in office, is to get elements of the government to bend to his lies, from making the National Weather Service insist that he was correct about Hurricane Dorian's path in 2019 when he was wrong. The National Park Service, right, when he was elected, the inauguration pictures. Show me that my crowd is bigger than everyone else's crowd. He's often used government to try and back up his lies, big and small. And then you get to January the 6th, and you get to the election, and the DOJ, he says, just say it's corrupt, and my people will take care of the rest. And actually, Jeffrey Rosen and Richard Donoghue and others say, no, we won't go along with this. What does this tell us about next time round, a second Trump presidency? There are no guardrails, are there, if he comes back into office? We're already being told he's going to purge the bureaucracy. Who's going to stop the lies from being official then?
Yeah, the book traces how Trump uses lies, big and small, to indeed hijack the Republican Party and the conservative media and gets both those entities to amplify his lies. He uses the power of government, even for ridiculous examples like the two you just mentioned, to try to cover his tracks. And he tried his damnedest to pull the levers of government to get the election overturned. It didn't work, but just barely. And if the vice president that day had made a different decision, we'd be in a very different place as a nation. To answer your question about going forward, There are no guardrails. The skeleton crew, Team Crazy as they were deemed, the Sidney Powells, the Rudy Giulianis, the Michael Flynns, who took up in the Oval Office after Election Day because so much of the West Wing had hollowed out because staffers had either quit or had gotten COVID or in isolation, allowing those elements to have free reign of the West Wing. Those are the type of people, the true believers, who will be with Donald Trump were he to take office again in 2025. Those foreign policy guardrails of James Mattis or Rex Tillerson or John Kelly, the former chief of staff, there aren't going to be those people around anymore. It's only going to be those who were with him at the very end of his first term. Those are the folks who'd be there for the second.
Indeed. Let me ask you this, Jonathan. I mentioned, I don't know if you heard the introduction, I played some of Christina Caramo in Michigan saying some serious nonsense about abortion. She said even worse about demons and Satan and sex. And she's not the only weird candidate out there. There's a lot of them. And before they would have been fringe weirdos who lost in the primaries. Now they get the endorsement of the former president and can win high office. I've got to ask you, I've covered politics for many years on both sides of the Atlantic. I've never been a White House correspondent or a congressional correspondent. You're White House bureau chief for Politico, which prides itself on being a straight shooting organization. Explain to our viewers how someone like yourself, what do you and your colleagues do when you're confronted by this kind of political reality? Candidates who are off the deep end, like there's no both sides when it comes to a Christina Caramo or a Kari Lake, who are just saying absolute nonsense. Lock up Anthony Fauci. You'll get possessed by demons if you have sex. How do you cover that as a journalist in 2022?
Yeah, well, for Politico now and previously with the Associated Press, two organizations that believe in straight shooting. And our job is to try to do just that and to call out lies, to deem them as such if needed, to provide the necessary context and fact-checking. But it's a challenge. And frankly, and this discussion that many have had before, the media fell short early in the Trump years, where we just sort of, I think, out of habit, that you could, at times at least, repeat verbatim what the President of the United States says with reasonable confidence that it was true. And we all proved that was not correct, particularly in the shorthand of Twitter, where the 140 and now 280 characters make context so hard. That's what's so essential now with both fringe candidates now who have a shot at legitimate elected office, but also, frankly, that'll be the challenge with Trump going forward, too. Do we as a media need to label him as a insurrectionist candidate if he still, as we all assume, will not have conceded his 2020 loss while trying to win in 2024?
One last question, Jonathan. I've got to ask. Trump is now suing CNN, or he says he's going to sue CNN for defamation, for their reporting on his election fraud claims and their use of a phrase that all of us have used, including today, the big lie. His lawyer says CNN linked Trump to Hitler because it was Hitler who coined the expression the big lie. I notice that's the name of your new book. Are you worried at all about a lawsuit coming from Team Trump on your end?
I haven't received a letter yet from Bedminster, and I suppose, on one hand, it'd be welcome advertising for the book, but we're not going to encourage litigation just at this particular moment. But I will note this, that Donald Trump, who rarely turns down an opportunity to engage in an interview, to combat with the press, and certainly he and I had a up-and-down relationship while I was White House correspondent there while he was in office. He called me a sleazebag once and threw me out of a number of events and certainly didn't like what I asked him in Helsinki. But having said that, he and his team initially agreed to sit for an interview with my book, but once they realized more what it was about, they withdrew that offer. Donald Trump decided not to talk.